Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast. Welcome back to Thursday Night Live. Took a bit of a holiday hiatus over the last month or so. Of course, did the show in person over at AU Club. We are still sponsored and promoted by AU Club here as we'll move online for basketball season. We are happy to be back. Nathan King here with Jason Caldwell. Going to talk, of course, all things Auburn tonight. Going to be in and out of here if you're watching live on YouTube and Facebook. Going to be in and out in about 30 minutes because we know it's 6:30. We got a playoff game on Thursday night, and so obviously didn't want to get in the way of that. But Jason, it is Thursday now, looking to Saturday. Auburn basketball will be on the road again at South Carolina. We talked about it on the post-game pod, but we'll rehash it a little bit. It was a tremendous effort for Texas in that second half of that game on Tuesday, but as you and I talked about, a win is a win. A win is a win on the road in the SEC, especially when you look at the rest of the league and what happened, particularly on Tuesday. That's another quad one win for Auburn. Jason, I was looking in my notebook the day afterwards. It's insane. Auburn has 7 quad one wins this season. 3 last year, 2 of which came in the SEC tournament, so that doesn't carry a lot of weight. Basically, they only had 1. Kentucky had 6 quad one wins last year. Kentucky was a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. It goes to show you where this resume already is. So nowhere to go but up for this team. But at the same time, obviously got to play well on the road to win again on Saturday.
Yeah, and the thing is that they're just starting with quad one opportunities, and that's part of why the preseason schedule was so good. Not preseason, non-conference schedule was so good, and then leading up to this conference schedule, I went and looked at, and people are because there's been this big debate already about number one in the net, Duke or Auburn. I was like, it's going to take care of itself. There's no need to be worried about that on January the 9th. It's going to take care of itself. If Auburn does what it's supposed to do on the court or what it could do on the court, then Auburn's going to be the number one team in the net, in my opinion, because of the schedule they played. Duke only has 3 quad one games left on its schedule as we stand today. That's the difference in these leagues. It's mind-blowing to me. They only have 1 ranked team left. That's it. In the ACC, they only have 1 ranked team left. And so you start looking at the opportunities for Auburn, and it's just crazy to think about all the games still left for this team. And so, yeah, what they've already done is pretty awesome. But you could be looking at at 9, 10 quad one wins for this team easily. And heck, it might be the end of February when that happens.
Yeah, I didn't realize that about Duke. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, like we've talked about it, all offseason and leading into the year, expecting the SEC to be really good. You've kind of created now, because all the teams are so good, kind of this echo chamber during the season of just a bunch of quad one games where everyone's beating up on each other. If you're Auburn and you come out on top of that with a winning record in quad one, that would be tremendous, and that gives you a chance for a high seed. We're well past, barring big changes, we're well past winning record in quad one. We're at the point now where Auburn is, again, 7-1. A lot of those games are going to be at home, Jason, is the big thing. Like Mississippi State coming up on Tuesday, that's a home game for you.
Yeah, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Florida, all those games home. Yes, you're right. The opportunity is there for this team to do something that, it's without saying, they've already done something that no Auburn team has done. But you're talking about matching up with the potential records of teams that nobody has done in maybe not a long time.
Was there anything from Tuesday? I was kind of racking my brain about this. Is there anything from Tuesday that you come away like you specifically concerned about? I just there's things you can kind of point to across the board that in a comeback like that, I just can't necessarily land on anything that strikes that much concern.
No, I don't think it. Watching like Texas A&M, Oklahoma on Wednesday night, you look at having 2 guys, and you had a guy go nuts for Texas, and each of those teams had a guy go nuts, but Oklahoma turned the ball over a bunch down the stretch to allow Texas A&M to do that. Auburn didn't really turn it over a bunch. They had some empty possessions at times, but you look up and you scored 87 points. So I don't know that there's anything specific other than you tip your cap to a guy that just single-handedly almost brought his team back, and those things happen. And so, I don't know that there's a specific thing. I don't think it was really a lapse for Auburn at times. Do I think you could have maybe he made some difficult shots, but there were probably a few too many fouls in there as well. And that's one thing that maybe you look at this team going, they might give some too many of those opportunities at times, but that comes with playing defense the way they do. And it almost depends on the night sometimes on what officiating crew you get. I watch, and also sometimes, I don't know, it depends on what you are. Houston plays as or more aggressive than Auburn does, and it doesn't seem to impact them. Teams just go, well, that's who they are. They're going to foul a bunch, and we're just going to let it go. For whatever reason, Auburn seems to get called with a lot of those, and I don't know if it's just a little bit of, oh, that's their reputation. Well, Houston's reputation is to play really physical, but they don't seem to get as many calls. So sometimes I think you take that with what it is, knowing that sometimes there's going to be some of those nights. But yeah, I don't think there was anything you go, man, that's got to change. Well, other than allowing the guy to get crazy and make a bunch of crazy shots, I don't know if there's anything else.
Yeah, and I think it kind of depends, like you said, depends on the crew, depends on the way the game goes. Texas was not physical. They were not. They had a bunch of guys wanting to shoot elbow jumpers.
Correct.
Kaluma made a lot of those shots. I mean, he's a big dude, but like a lot of those shots
in the paint. No.
Yeah, it was not in the paint. And so I think maybe that was happening early on. And then when the fouls started coming later, like if you had, again, when they played Houston, when they played Iowa State, they weren't called. I mean, because those teams were just at a war with each other. I mean, it was a defensive battle the whole game. And so, yeah, you're right. If you look at Auburn again, if you're wanting to try to nitpick, you mentioned the fouls. I'm looking at their sort of team sheet here, 234 in the country, 242 in the country in opponent free throw rate. That's per field goal attempt. It's free throw per field goal attempt. So, a little lower than you would like there. And 216 in the country in forcing turnovers. This is not an Auburn team this year. I have never once thought this is a team that's going to gamble for turnovers. That's just not what they are going to do on the perimeter. They're going to line you up 5-on-5 on both offense and defense and say, hey, we feel like we can beat you. This game on Saturday, Jason, you and I were talking about it yesterday. South Carolina lost by a lot. They lost by 20 at home to Alabama. Let me see. I tweeted it yesterday. They lost by 35 in their first game at Mississippi State. And against Auburn last year, they lost by 40. And then the SEC tournament, they lost by 31. Needless to say, I don't think the spread's out yet as we record this on Thursday morning, but I would expect Auburn to be a healthy favorite. This is one where you're playing what is probably going to be one of the bottom tier teams in the league. At least so far, it looks that way. But when you've got a guy like Murray Boyles, who's an NBA player, Nick Pringle is a really physical player on the front line for them. South Carolina can do some things, but I think just like last year, Jason, when you hear about matchups, I think Auburn matches up really well against the South Carolina team.
Yeah, the danger for these really is how you approach the game. Can you avoid one of those nights where the energy's not there? The good thing about Auburn is when you have 8, 9, 10 guys that play, that's something that helps you because you're not a team that you feel like you're going to get worn out. And so I think that's the one thing you hope to avoid. And thinking back, you mentioned earlier what happened in Gainesville. The danger sometimes is having a game where the shots just don't fall. Well, when all you do is shoot from the perimeter, which is what that Tennessee team is doing right now, they're not playing in the paint. That makes it more likely. This Auburn team has Janai Broome, and you have Chaney Johnson, and you have guys that not only are scoring in the paint, but guys that are taking the ball to the rim too. And Miles Kelly's doing a much better job at being more aggressive and getting downhill and doing stuff. That helps you avoid some of those things. They always say defense travels. And so I think if you're Auburn defensively, if you're defense and looking at Florida and looking at A&M, the one thing that I still think is the thing that this Auburn team has to remember is rebounding. That's the one thing I look at and go, they have to be consciously rebounding because Texas A&M will kill you on the offensive boards. Florida is long, and they will rebound. Tennessee's aggressive. I mean, there's teams that'll do it. That if I look at one thing for this team, it's going to be the consistency of attacking the glass and rebounding is going to be the thing I look at for this team. And that'll be important on Saturday because South Carolina's, they're missing some shots. If you get your ball and you get rebounds and you get out in transition, then that's a game that could get out of hand if you do those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's Murray Boyles is a guy that really looked the part against Auburn last season as a freshman in the SEC. Now he's a sophomore. I think he's a guy who could be a first-round pick. Nick Pringle, Auburn fans will remember his name from Alabama. He's actually playing better right now with South Carolina. They've got him in a more featured role, and he's doing a good job. But again, that Auburn just matched up so well against them last year. They don't have Michi Johnson now. I don't know if you saw this, Jason. Miles Studi, I don't know if you remember that name, the Vanderbilt transfer at forward. He's out with blood clots. So hoping the best for him. He'll be out for quite a while. He was playing a decent role for that team. Noon on Saturday in Columbia, South Carolina. Jason, if you want to turn it over to football, feels like it's been quite some time since we've talked football on a podcast, but a couple coaching moves for Auburn on the defensive side of the ball were made official. You reported both of those at different times. TJ Rushing was all the way back the day before Charles Kelly went to Jacksonville State, so it makes a lot of sense. Rushing was a guy. Well, I guess we'll go starting with we'll go each of them. TJ Rushing was a guy when Auburn brought him last year as an off-field hire. It was like, wow, this is a really good guy to be not one of your on-field assistants. Who has a lot of pedigree. Obviously was at Texas A&M, a guy Durkin is very comfortable with. Takes over an interesting safeties room, but that's the element of it I point to, Jason. Him and Durkin are very, very comfortable with one another. And look, in terms of an internal promotion, when you lose Charles Kelly, thought it made a lot of sense for them to go with Rushing.
I agree. I think there's a couple of things you look at. This guy obviously is very familiar with DJ Durkin in this scheme, and so going from Texas A&M to Auburn, he's as experienced in this system as anybody, and so I think he'll be, safeties working with nickels some. I think that's going to be the role there for him, and obviously, Weston McGriff can do both as well. So you got two secondary coaches that'll handle the secondary, but nowadays, because the other guys can be on the field and you're going to have additional help coaching in the secondary like you do at every other position. So I think that's going to be valuable for a guy like TJ Rushing. And both of these guys have a history in special teams. They haven't decided yet who's going to be the coordinator. I think both of these guys are going to be involved in coaching special teams for Auburn. We'll just see kind of who has that role, sometime here down the road.
Yeah, I don't think some people maybe don't realize how many hands go into special teams. Like for example, Marcus Davis helps coach the return men.
Yeah,
he was a punt return guy at Auburn. Cadillac Williams, I remember when he was here, was very involved with return guys as well, because you don't have a special teams coach that is able to do all those things. You have different guys across the staff.
Too many things involved. So you have a guy that coordinates kind of the scheme. The kickers. It's like golfers. The kickers have their own kicking coaches that they work with, and you just kind of make sure they're regimented. They're doing the things they're supposed to do. All those things. But yeah, your offensive line coach and his guys will coach the field goal and extra point protection teams. Your defensive line coach will coach the defensive line on field goal block. All those things. Then your gunners on punt return. Kickoff guys are coached by your DB coaches and linebacker coaches, those kind of things. Yeah, it is a full-on group effort when you start talking about special teams. Yeah, so there'll be a bunch of folks involved.
And we reference special teams so much because Tanner Burns will be heading to Texas State to take a job there. I believe he has a previous relationship with GJ. It's always difficult for me to GJ Kinney over there at Texas State. And Tanner was a guy who took a lot of criticism, I think, during this past season. So maybe not a massive surprise to see him make a move. I will say at the same time, I think Auburn had a lot of bad luck on special teams as well. I think the thing I would point to on special teams, like everyone else, is the holding calls, things that really set Auburn back. In terms of missed field goals, and you just had a bad break this season. Towns Magoo's better than that. And he just had a lot of situations where he just kind of got, I think, internally. But the other assistant coach that they've now made official is a guy who's coming home. Rock Bellantoni was obviously on Brian Harson's staff. Jog my memory, Jason. He was an analyst first, and then when
analyst first, he was an analyst first, moved on the field, and quickly became, I think a fan favorite, a player favorite. Derek Hall and Eku Leota, those guys loved Rock, and those guys produced. They played really well. And, he was on Harson's staff, but he wasn't a Harson guy. And so that's the thing I think that separates him a little bit. I mean, you look at him and, Florida Atlantic history, He has history of being a coordinator. All throughout this process, he's a guy that has been very well respected. And I mean, you see, last couple of years, the Florida Atlantic's defense was pretty darn good in 2023. Last year struggled a little bit. He gets removed. They end up firing the head coach, and Chad Lunsford immediately brings him back to be the coordinator. And basically, so look, it wasn't his fault. And so, yeah, I think this is a great move. I mean, connections to South Florida, yes, he has those. That's where his family still lives. His boys play baseball down there. But I think Rock, and Nathan, we know him. We got to know him over the years. Is a guy that walks in anybody's house, and people are going to go, yeah, I like that guy. That's a guy I want to go play for. And so I think that's a valuable part of things for him. And again, the experience of being at Auburn, understanding knowing the people, for him, it's just going to be getting used to this staff. And that's the good part about this is I think the fit is really good. He hasn't worked with any of these defensive guys, knows a lot of support staff, those kind of folks. And I think that's how it is. There's friends of friends, I think, with him and DJ Durkin. So guys that have worked. And so I think that was the thing going, hey, this guy's going to fit. And I think he will. I think he'll fit really well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, well respected. This was a guy that everybody loved in the building when he was there. Last time, Derek Hall, I mean, like during his NFL draft process, could not speak highly enough of Rock Bellantoni. So he will be taking over the Buck linebackers, the edge position. Jason talked about him at FAU, like he was a coordinator, and so you bring in a guy who has FBS coordinator experience. He was Auburn special teams coordinator when he was here the previous time. So lots of boxes checked off. Both of those guys, Jason Bellantoni and Rushing, really interesting groups. Like they both take over really intriguing groups. And I think we'll kind of use that as a way to transition now to talk about the portal. Auburn's most recent addition in the portal is a really interesting player, Chris Murray from Sam Houston State. Jason, looking at his PFF numbers, pressure rate really, really high, 34 pressures in 260 snaps, 260 pass rushing snaps. That's a good number for him. You saw him, you talked to him. That is a massive, massive individual. I think we're starting to see maybe that, and Jalen McLeod was fantastic. Jalen McLeod had a really, really good season. I think DJ Durkin, maybe we saw because TJ Searcy, the Florida transfer, visited. He didn't end up committing, but maybe Durkin likes those bigger bodies there at the edge. Regardless, Murray, I mean, 6'5", 250, 260, first team all-conference player there at Sam Houston. It's a guy who checks a lot of the same boxes Jalen McLeod did when he came over from App State. If he has anything near that kind of production, he's going to be a really good pickup for them.
Yeah, I think this guy that was TCU out of high school, so people saw the twitch and saw that initial burst going, hey, we think this guy can play at a high level. And I think he's continued to do that. His numbers honestly kind of mirror Jalen McLeod's a little bit in terms of production over the course when he was at App State and him at Sam Houston State. So I think you're getting a guy that is kind of playing maybe his best football at the moment and kind of growing into the spot. And the other thing, great guy, just from sitting down, we talked to him and kind of getting it. I think he's a really good fit for what you're looking for, which is older, experienced guy that can be one of those guys. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Dorn Mosey when you think about it in terms of just personality, a guy that becomes a leader for the team, may not even be a starter, but becomes a leader. And so I think when you look at Kieron Crawford and adding him in Jamata Waller and then Jared Smith coming in, you got 4 different types of guys that can all compete and give you some different things. And yeah, I think it's a really intriguing group, and looking forward to the production out of that. But you're right, I think you see a different side of things. Obviously, Jared Smith's going to give you something that Auburn hasn't had in a long, long time, which is a guy that's 6'5", 6'6", probably close to 260 pounds right now. And you look at him and he still looks like a basketball player. I mean, I think Jared Smith can be a 275-pound edge, stand-up, run-around guy, which is essentially the same size as Keldrick Falk on the other end, but being able to set the edge a little bit more in the run game and gives you, because you felt like it with Jalen McLeod, it's been more of a drop guy. And I think we'll still see them do some of those things, but I feel like it gives you more of a fourth true defensive lineman at times too.
Yeah, I mean, that group has so much talent. I mean, you factor in the fact that Amaris Williams can play there and did play there a little bit last year. Maybe he kind of fleshes out more as an end, but man, lots of talent. Jamonte Waller is a guy we thought really highly of. Obviously, you hate to see it derailed by an injury in year one, but he was going to redshirt anyway. So I think getting him back in the fold will be really, really interesting as well. Over at the safety spot, we won't touch on this too much, but again, another really interesting rotation to see how that plays out. Champ Anthony will be back in the mix at nickel or corner. We'll see kind of where they need him. He was really good at both. He showed that he was really good at both last season. The question for me is, like, can Anquan Fagans come right on campus and help? Can he be a starter there at safety alongside his Thompson buddy Caleb Harris? I mean, from you having seen both those guys, I know you think that's a decent possibility for a guy like Fagans, and then Eric Winters. I mean, he's just a unicorn. Like how can they help tap into such a unique skill set for a guy?
Yeah, I think the entire secondary is really interesting because of the options that you have. You mentioned Champ Anthony. He ended up being really good at corner when you had him out there last year. Is he good enough at corner for you to I don't know, can you slide K and Lee into nickel? Can you do those things? Can Anquan Fagans go, hey, let's run Anquan at nickel, because I think he can play that easily. You got Sylvester Smith back. You got Caleb Harris back. You think about T Love, a bigger physical safety that's back. You add in Eric Winters, and so there's options. You add in a transfer corner to the group. You add in a transfer safety and from Georgia Tech. So like you have made that group deep. It was already talented, but you look at those possible options in the secondary at all 5 spots. You think about 2 corners, 2 safeties, and a nickel, and that's a talented group. Going to be fun to watch them develop and see how they come along. And as you mentioned, Amaris Williams, I think we're going to see Keldrick Falk and Amaris Williams be a 1-2 punch kind of thing this year. And then I think we'll see Zykeivous Walker move inside and be an older, bigger body, and allow those 2 guys to really be the true 1-2 end punch, and give him a little bit more opportunity to kind of step into that role. So again, a lot of options for this defense.
Something that very well, we're recording this here on Thursday morning. You guys will see it in the evening time. Something that very well could happen between now and then is we're still waiting on Jeffrey Embaugh. That's a guy that we expect, as of right now, as of time recording, if he's going to land somewhere, we expect him to land at Auburn. Of course, the former Auburn transfer went to Purdue for a defensive lineman. Pretty productive. Like those numbers aren't bad at Purdue. Just a guy that, I mean, so much potential, Jason. I mean, it just oozing with it. You mentioned another great guy too. I mean, everybody loved Jeffrey Embaugh in the building, and if they're able to get him back, again, another guy who can play a couple different spots and NFL upside for him. You've just got to be able to get consistent production out of him.
I think you look at it now and you go, because people are wondering how many interior guys will you sign? Well, in this defense, it's only 2 spots. So you think about it's nose and 3 technique, the tackle spot. So you got 2 spots, and you think about you brought in Dallas Walker. And if you were to get Jeffrey Embaugh, that's 2 transfers. You have Bobby Jameson Travis, Zykeivous Walker, and Malik Blockton back. That's 5 guys for 2 spots. And then you signed Jordan Crawford, Antonio Coleman, Malik Autry, Darion Smith. That's 9 players. That's a good mix of older experience, guys that still are getting some seasoning, and young guys that you're expect to be impact guys because they're really explosive. I like the mix if you can get a Jeffrey Embaugh. I think you do need that one other older, experienced guy up front to go along with this group, and a guy that, frankly, his best football is still somewhere out there. We haven't seen it yet. I mean, he was so raw, but athletic and big and physical. Jeffrey Embaugh is a guy that could really take off with another year. But no, I think that group has the pieces in place with that one other addition to get you ready for 2025.
As we understand it, I don't think they're going to the semester's about to start. Like, if it's going to be somebody else for the semester, we think it's just going to be Embaugh. But after the spring, as we've kind of noted a couple times on the website, if there is a defensive tackle they feel is worth swinging for, Vontrell King-Williams is going to keep his options open there. Because if you feel like you have the connection or the ability to get a difference maker at defensive tackle, you're not going to turn that guy down.
Correct.
Maybe that's a guy post-spring, a guy like that they'll look for.
I think you look at I think that's a spot, maybe at a couple of spots where you go, like, if you get a guy that's a freak, no matter where, it may be best available player. You might say, hey, they make our team better, especially if it's a 1-year guy. You're like, hey, you make a run at that guy. I do think that true middle linebacker is still somewhere down the road for this team. They brought in Jeremiah Alexander. Didn't have a ton of experience, but they thought he could be that guy. He committed to Clemson. I still think somewhere along the line, can you find an older guy that comes in for 1 year and kind of helps you plug up a little bit of that inside with some experience? That's the one spot I look at. Obviously, tight end is you go, hey, could you do that? Could you potentially? You brought in another Maryland transfer, so you have those couple of Maryland transfers you have in. Brandon Frazier coming back, and we were just kind of spitballing last night. We saw Tate Johnson do a little bit of that last year. That's a guy that you could say, hey, be our short yardage goal line tight end, dig into that role, and that would give you an extra body in that role, for this offense, which will be important too.
Yeah, linebacker's the one for me where it's like that's the only group where I would say I feel like you still need somebody because
Robert Woodyard is your vet.
Yeah, right, and the most productive player is DeMarcus Riddick, which is good. He's a fantastic player.
Those could be your starters, but you feel like you still probably want to grab an older guy somewhere along the line.
We were talking about cornerback, Jason. It's funny. Rayon Strader is a guy who doesn't get talked about much. We have him 24/7 rated as the number 5 corner in the portal.
Yep.
Like that is a guy I think we talked about, where's Champ Anthony going to wind up? Having K and Lee and Jay Crawford back. I think this corner room, they could be really, like Kinsley Faustin was thrown into the fire. I thought he was pretty good, actually.
That may be another nickel option there, too.
They see him as a nickel because I think they wanted him to be there. And then all of a sudden, I think it was the Georgia game. We're like, oh, he's warming up at corner.
There you go. And J.C. Hart, a guy that still has a lot of good football ahead of him, the biggest, most athletic of the bunch, maybe.
We could sit here and talk portal for a long time. Maybe that's a show for the near future. Jason, but one more guy we'll touch on. I think they've rounded out that quarterback room. Tanner Bailey comes over. He actually doesn't come over. He was already at Auburn. A guy that I know you were very familiar with from that Birmingham area, played a little bit of football at South Carolina. As a 4th quarterback option goes, you can do a whole lot worse than this guy. Gives them another passer for the spring to go with Deuce Knight and Jackson Arnold.
Yeah, I think it's huge for the spring and for the fall. 4th quarterback gives you the guy that's played some in this league. But I think as much as anything, this is a guy that loves Auburn and will say, hey, what I need to do. I think he's done that his whole life. He was a standout at Gordo, played as a young age and moved on and played baseball and a lot of other sports. These are just one of these guys I think you have to have. I think there's certain guys you go, man, you just need a guy like this on your roster. And I think Tanner Bailey's one of those guys. And so, I think it's going to be really important for the spring to have him as that 3rd quarterback to kind of jump in there and get some reps and to help out your receiver. You need guys to throw to receivers, and sooner or later you run out of arms. And so I think it's going to be important for that. But, I think a really good addition for a guy this late in the process. He just came back to school at Auburn after leaving South Carolina, graduated in 2.5 years. Now he's coming back, and he told me, hey, I'm going for my 2nd degree. So here's his opportunity to do that and get back on the field and play football for, the dream school and dream opportunity for him.
Yeah, spring practice is obviously there's a lot of guys we're really looking forward to seeing. I wrote about it this morning as these early enrollees start to come on campus this week. Obviously school starts on Monday. Again, it's like Deuce Knight, this quarterback situation has played out to where like a true freshman getting most, if not all, of the number 2 reps in the spring is far from an insignificant thing. When you factor in, like, he's going to be throwing to Horatio Fields on a consistent basis, like Perry Thompson. Like, he's got good players out there.
My guess is that he'll get some first-team reps. I think you'll be rotating him in there. I think he'll be throwing to Cam, and he'll be throwing to those guys too. I think when you have those 2 guys and then Tanner as the 3rd guy, I think you'll mix them in because I honestly feel like that this spring Deuce is going to have every opportunity. I know people go like, well, it's Jackson Arnold's job, and it probably will be. But I think Deuce is going to have every opportunity to jump in there just because of the amount of reps he's going to get.
Deuce Knight to me, and maybe I'm just recency bias of a big ultra talented true freshman, but DJ Lagway came right in at Florida. I think Deuce he is raw and he's got some passing stuff to tune up, but just if he can start to put stuff together, there is a reason, Freeze thought so highly of him and everybody thought so highly of him. So That's one guy. I mean, talk about A-Day game. Like, that's a guy that everybody will be really excited.
And I think the next couple of months should be really big for him to get in a college strength and conditioning program. And to do that, I mean, look at Deuce, and I mean, he's already gotten a little bit bigger. I think it's the guy that, he's probably 210, something like that. He could be 218 to 220 by the time you get on the field in the spring and go, man, that guy looks different already. And then you start to add in the concepts and things on offense, and there's no telling how quickly it could happen for a guy like that.
We'll close out here. We've been going about 30 minutes. Let's talk about the football game tonight, Jason. Looking at it now, and maybe I will completely eat these words and I don't know what I'm talking about, but Notre Dame a 1-point favorite. Is that, you can tell me I'm wrong, it's a little bit surprising to me. What's kind of your perception?
Not really. I'm honest. I think they're physical up front on both sides. They have a good pass rush. Their secondary is extremely good, and that's the thing you look at. Can you put the ball in Drew Aller's hands? And quite honestly, I still don't trust him. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe he'll come out and light it up. And I know he's the best NFL prospect among the bunch by most people's eyes. But if you ask me which quarterback I trust to make a play with a game on the line, it's the guy on the other side. I've just seen him do it. And we saw him do it against Georgia. And he can throw the ball. He's a runner and can do things too. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a really fun football game. Again, Drew Aller's a guy that's extremely talented. I still have yet to see him go, hey, you go win the game. He hasn't done one of those things. They've won a bunch of games. He hasn't won one. Riley Leonard has won games. And so I always lean towards that in games like this.
Guy who's also won games, capital W. Maybe I'm being too harsh on James Franklin. I know everybody kind of puts him down. If I'm taking a coach in this game, I'm taking Marcus Freeman. I mean, he went out, talk about against Georgia, an example of a coach saying, no, we're going to win this game instead of giving you the opportunity to come back. I thought Notre Dame was so impressive. It was so impressive in that game. So that's tonight, 6:30 on ESPN. I will say something about Penn State. I was talking to somebody about the other day. Since losing to Ohio State, Jason, very, very impressive. Destroyed Washington, destroyed Purdue on the road, won at Minnesota with the backup quarterback, destroyed Maryland at home, nearly beat Oregon in the Big 12, the Big 10 title game, destroyed SMU, destroyed Boise State. And so they're playing at a really high level since that loss to Ohio State. We sit here, it's the first year of this system. No conference champions advance to the semis. But I was thinking about it, Jason, like I'm not super surprised about that when you kind of look case by case. Boise State, group of 5. Arizona State, really good team, but maybe not powerful. And they're playing Texas. Georgia didn't have its quarterback. And then I know Oregon was a big surprise, and the way it happened was a surprise.
They had to play Ohio State.
They had to play Ohio State twice. That's my thing. How many times have we seen? It is so hard to beat. It was shades of Alabama LSU.
Matchups were so important in this thing. Had you look at this and you go, Ohio State on the other side of Oregon, can anybody else beat Oregon? I don't know. Maybe not. Nobody's beaten Ohio State the way they played the last 2 weeks. So that one is out there. But you start looking at it, going, matchup. Penn State's played really well. I fully believe if Tennessee would have been in Penn State's spot, Tennesse'd still be playing. And I don't think Tennessee was great, but matchups were really favorable for them to play at home against SMU and then to play Boise State. Tennessee probably wins both those games too. And so I think that's important. It's created some excitement. It's created a bunch of games that people are watching. I do think there needs to be some tweaking with it and to figure out a way to go. Let's make sure the best 4 teams get those 4 desirable buys, because I don't think that necessarily time off impacted this nearly as much as who you're playing. And so I still think if you have the right teams in place and go, hey, who do we feel like the best 4 teams are right now? What's shown up during the year, and those 4 teams get that first bye, then I think it makes those first games a lot more fun as well leading up to this.
What do you think about the possibility of home games in the quarterfinals? That's something I kind of, maybe it's big money and you want to play it like a bowl site like that. I kind of wonder if you're a top 4 seed, you're not a little You're like, you do all that, and you didn't even get a home game.
I agree. I think there's some part of it to be able to go, okay, first round, you get a home game. The second round, those 4 teams that get byes get a home game, and then you put them in all 4 of those bowls. Question is, how do you fill up all these bowl games? I mean, it's just 4 games, but you start to tweak this thing going, okay, how does that work? I'd rather see it that way. I think from a monetary standpoint for fans, you're asking people to travel. Okay, all right, you're going to this site. Now you're going to this site. Well, if you win again, now you got to go to this place. I think sooner or later people are going to go, I can't do that, especially when tickets are, outrageous at some of these games. Some of them you get in, you could have gone to Atlanta for $40 to watch Texas Arizona State. I think if you play those first ones on the road and then guarantee that you know where the second round games are going to be because they're going to host, I think that's what college football is. College football is a home game environment. I think that's deserving, and I think then you still have 4 bowl games, 2 bowl games, and 1 bowl game that you can play these things at.
That's exactly what our buddy Patrick did.
Or 2 games of 1. So
yeah, that's what Patrick did. He went over to Atlanta for the day just for fun. He said tickets were not that bad to go see.
Yeah, you can do that at some of these games. I think fans are going to go, look, we can't keep traveling, to 3 or 4 different spots to do this and pay the money that's required.
Yeah. Well, as we're sitting here talking, the game might have started. So we're going to go ahead and sign off here on Thursday Night Live. We appreciate everybody for joining and tuning in. We will be back next week for Jason Caldwell. I am Nathan King. We'll talk to y'all soon.